the world around us, right? We want to get people fit, but we make sure they have an escalator to get to the gym. God forbid they go up the stairs themselves, right? So we want to get more movement in the day. I always joke around. I've got an almost 3-year-old at home. I go to the daycare. Every single 3-year-old has a perfect squat, right? I'm looking for the personal trainers and the strength coaches in the daycare. There are none, right? Then how come by the time we're 25, 30, 45, 50, now 10 to 20% of people move the way we're supposed to, right? And we know that this movement and exercise is a key part for our health. So we've got to keep people moving. And it begs this question. We know that movement and exercise can help to trigger, but this idea of intermittent fasting, is it just a fat loss thing? Is it the latest fad for helping people to lose weight? Does it have other implications in terms of what it can do for us from an overall health perspective? Because if people are coming to you to lose weight, it's nice if you can help them lose weight and get healthier at the same time. Normally those two things happen together, but not always with some of the fad approaches, right? All right, so quick review here, the physiology, right? We're about to have lunch. Well, after your breakfast, we'll use it then. You had your nice high protein, high fat, maybe some carbohydrates at breakfast. You got a good release of insulin from the pancreas, right? It's going to help you to soak up all those carbohydrates, right? The more carbohydrates you eat, the more insulin output. The more out of shape, overweight, and poor health you are, typically the greater output you're going to get because the body is not as efficient at dealing with that. And one of the great mechanisms is that GLUT4 transporter. You exercise more, that capacity to soak up the carbohydrates becomes improved. Of course, once you've soaked them up, you can use them for various things. If you walked here from wherever you ate breakfast, then great, you used it as a fuel source, right? You burned all that off, fantastic. If you did a strength training session before you had your breakfast, then you're converting a lot of that into glycogen, right? The carbohydrate stores in the muscle, which is nice. The more glycogen you have, the more carb stores you have, the more pasta you can eat, right? If you're a pasta fan, or carbohydrate, whatever you like, right? Of course, this last one here is stored as body fat. So we know that poor insulin sensitivity, right, which comes from, again, out of shape, overweight, poor health, it's going to predispose us to weight gain, right? The interesting thing, though, is that it's not, insulin dysfunction is the cause of diabetes, but we thought it's also the direct cause of weight gain, but we see increases in places that don't match up, right? America is the most obese country, but they don't have the most diabetes, right? We see rates of diabetes increasing at 4%, 5% a year, but rates of obesity 1% a year. Okay, so there's again these other hormones that are involved in cravings and food, but in the end, this insulin hormone is an anabolic hormone. It helps us to build stuff. Right? If you're active and moving and exercising, it's going to be a key player in helping to promote muscle gain. If your clients are sedentary, and hopefully not that sedentary, but if they are, it will build body fat. Okay? And of course, the main mechanism, your main fat-burning enzyme in the body is HSL, hormone-sensitive lipase, and higher insulin levels are going to directly block that. So you imagine that client who's struggling to lose weight, they wake up in the morning, they have that half bagel with their breakfast, and of course, insulin blood sugars go up. It's going to take quite a while for that to come down to baseline for them, and that mid-morning snack is likely going to bump it back up as well. So eating strategies that help to support a scenario where that HSL is upregulated and ready to act and burn is ones that we want to try to support, and we'll look at how the IF fits in. Insulin is also building, tissues are replicating more quickly. We see in higher levels of insulin or poor insulin sensitivity, 15 to 20% increased risks for cancers, right? Cells are turning over more quickly. So the body has to put out all these little fires constantly. And while it does a good job of doing so, it's like the mail. If it keeps coming in such high quantities, it's tough to put out all those little fires. So what about this idea then of changing just when we eat stuff, right? And again, average client, low-hanging fruit. We can design all sorts of very intricate diets. We can take all of their measurements and pump out carbohydrate and protein and fat ratios and caloric intakes. And while for some that can be good, for the average client, that's like giving them a book in Russian that they don't speak that language. We've got to make it easy. We've got to make it simple. So changing when they eat can be a really great strategy. When we look back at various religions, almost in any culture, whether it was religion or just in their culture, there's these periods where you don't eat. Right? Here in Canada, back in the day, they called it winter. Right? We go through these long periods where we just wouldn't eat as much, and we were able to maintain these body fat stores because we'd go through these periods where there'd be an energetic restriction, right? Of course, nowadays with Starbucks and 7-Eleven and everything else, there's no periods of restriction. We don't have to hunt and gather to find our food. So getting into some of these other strategies can be effective. At the end of the day, the simplest way to describe intermittent fasting is basically shrinking the amount of hours that people eat and expanding the hours they don't eat. Okay? Because what we forget is if we're getting up early, people get up at 6, 6:30, 7, even earlier, they have that first bite of food, and they're eating or snacking the whole day, and they might have that last snack while they're on the couch watching Game of Thrones or relaxing, whatever they're doing, at 11 o'clock at night, 11:30. So you start to realize that we're eating or snacking for 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 hours a day. This is a long, long time, right? So let's go through some of the strategies that we see in the literature. We'll do the 4 main ones. There's all sorts of ways that you can do this. This is the one that I find is most effective in clients because it's the simplest to start to integrate right off the bat. Okay? And so it's basically a 16-hour fasting window and an 8-hour eating window. And as soon as you tell someone that they're going to have to fast for 16 hours, it sounds pretty intense, doesn't it? That's a long time. Of course, once you start to tell them that they'll be sleeping for half that time, all of a sudden it gets a little easier, right? So effectively, this person would wake up in the morning and delay their morning meal, right? They would delay breakfast or not have breakfast, which for a lot of people, again, years and decades of breakfast is the most important meal of the day, and now you're telling them the answers to their low growth hormone or inability to lose weight is the fact that they're having breakfast. Because again, what are the breakfast options that we find around us? It's not going to be easy for them when they're on the way into work or stopping its importance to have those selections. And we'll talk about strategies in a minute, but delaying is what we're after here. So 10 a.m. would be breakfast. So they get up in the morning, they can have their morning coffee if they want to. Of course, we want to get away from that double-double. We want to get away from the sugars in there because that's going to, after you've slept all night, insulin is low, glucagon hormone is high, the body's ready to burn fat as a fuel source, right? But if we put sugars in, the body's always going to be after that path of least resistance and be burning those sugars for fuel. So if we can delay breakfast, green tea, black tea, coffee, first meal's at 10 o'clock. This strategy actually works really well for people who are sort of, whether it's busy at work in the morning or busy with kids and going to work in the morning. It's almost like breakfast gets in the way anyway. People are trying to get all these things done. It can free up time for a lot of people. Okay? It simplifies things in the morning. By the time they get to this mid-morning period, they're able to exhale a little bit and get their first meal in. Second meal of the day would be about 4 hours later, 2 p.m., and the last meal about 6 p.m. So that's an 8-hour eating window. You could change the window. You could start at 11 a.m. and go to 7 p.m. You could start at noon for some people. What happens when we start at noon? We eliminate breakfast. And that's always going to be the meal where it's easier for them to get high sugar, high carb. So all of a sudden they're going straight to the food court downtown Toronto, and there's salads and chicken and meat or tempeh, whatever you like, olive oil. There's much better food selections than you would find if you're going for breakfast. So you can stick to this sort of 3 square meals, or you could even add multiple meals in there, but this is the idea. They delay the first meal, and then after the last meal, no more eating. Okay? The funny part about eating in the evening is a lot of people get peckish in the evening, right? They get hungry. And it's, we think we eat because we need fuel, right? But oftentimes we just eat because it's a behavioral thing, right? People start snacking at the office, they think it's because they're hungry. No, it's because every day now for the last 2 or 3 years, they snack at exactly that same time, right? And it becomes a pattern. They're sitting at the desk, they snack, they're sitting on the couch at home, they snack. So breaking those patterns becomes a big key. And we'll talk about some strategies that we can use in terms of things that they can have to do that. So that's the first one, 16 and 8. The next one's a little bit more intensive, right? We're getting up to 20 hours of not eating and 4 hours of eating. So already, if you're looking at your average overweight or obese client, this type of protocol requires a lot more compliance. Right? So this is somebody who's likely already going to be very compliant. So somebody who's probably fit or lean to begin with and wants to get fitter or leaner. Right? Applying this in your average population would be a little bit trickier, but effectively that first meal could be noon or 2 o'clock, and then the last meal 4 hours later. And they can eat as much food as they want in that window. Okay? This is a popularized one. We'll look at the research here coming up. Basically having it flip-flopping, having a day of the week where we don't eat. Okay. So again here, Monday you'd be eating for about from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Tuesday all day fasting, and then Wednesday again back into the eating mode. So this is where this can be a very nice strategy, I find, in the short term for clients. But as we start to get over 4 weeks, you can imagine in your day-to-day life, this can start to become tricky, right? What happens if on these fasting days, there's big projects at work, there's driving kids around, there's meetings, etc. It can be difficult in the longer run. We'll have a look at that. And of course, the last one here is a 24-hour fast, right? Basically not eating throughout the entire day, and this is sort of 1 or 2 days a week that we would choose to do that for. Okay. This is interesting because we see so many clients these days with digestive issues, with the good and the bad bacteria, that dysbiosis that we tend to see, and we're reducing food intake, reducing carb intake, number one, but reducing food intake overall. So a nice way in the very short term for people to realize that they're getting benefit, or that the bacteria is sort of shifting. People with chronic congestion, clearing their throat in the morning, that never put the connection together, all of a sudden they wake up and by noon they're smelling things they haven't smelled for 5 years, right? That'll sort of cement that connection that, hey, the things that I'm taking in are really influencing my gut, and that's actually having an outcome on how the systems are running. So again, the whole idea here is this: we want to shrink the window that they're eating, expand the window that they're not eating. And it's nice when things are that simple, but when we start to dig into how they work, we see some pretty significant impact. So a lot of the original research here by Verity, 16 obese subjects here, this is in the late 2000s, 10-week trial. You had a 2-week control phase, a 4-week weight loss phase, and then a 4-week self-selected intake. And this is the progression here as we see through in terms of the weight loss in the controlled feeding phase, and then even when they can self-select, we see a maintenance, and then there's sort of a further progression there in terms of the body weight. So these are the earlier studies where we're taking groups, overweight groups, that again, just reducing the amount of intake throughout the day, we're getting a nice shift in terms of body composition.